And I understand in some ways why they felt like they couldn't do a bubble, because they probably, I'm sure there are some people who are already just thinking like, we have guys in this league that may not exactly be the most emotionally stable individuals. We have to be honest about this part. I imagine they're probably saying like, all right, and not saying they're all crazy or whatever else, but we have a lot of guys who are young, who are a little bit impulsive and a little bit reckless at times, even if they're not doing illicit behavior, but they're just young men. So I imagine they probably just sat there and said to themselves, if we put these guys in the bubble and we're talking about, you know, close to 1,000 people when it comes to the teams, when it comes to the players, when it comes to the coaching staffs, when it comes to other personnel for 32 teams around the league, to try to do one or two or maybe even four bubbles and force people to just be in this environment, and knowing how physical the game is and knowing the emotional toll the game takes on them on top of whatever things are going on out off the field. I imagine they probably thought about this to say the bubble may not exactly be the best idea unless we have a crap load of psychologists on hand, unless we have all these sort of different personnel on hand. So I imagine there were a lot of logistical things in not going towards a bubble that they didn't want to take part in. Mm-hmm. However, I guess my anger about this situation is that these other leagues decided to take this chance, and they had the buy-in from their players and from their coaches. They've had the constant conversations to say, listen, we want to play these games. We want to finish our season in the case of the NBA or the NHL. We want to get our season started in the case of MLS and some of these other leagues, the WNBA. There was a constant conversation on both sides between management / ownership and the players / players union. The conversations we saw or we heard about in the NFL did not have that same fruitfulness. And as my son says, hi, yes, you're going to watch Chip and Potato? Sorry. You can edit that if you want. I don't care. By the way, everybody.
Oh, let it roll. I think that a fully acceptable part of the world we're in right now is interactions of various people in homes during product. We roll it.
You're all going to meet my
on the Straight Out Low Cash Network, man. We roll it the way it goes.
Hey, listen, you all probably going to somehow, some way meet my son through this whole thing. So, you know, that'll be great. He's almost 2 years old, and he's great, and he's very excited about the TV show he's watching on my phone right now. So, yeah. But back to what I was saying. I think that again, my anger is that the conversations were fruitless, and they've had so much time to sort of progress, and things never progress for whatever reason. And when you see that, you know, I think back to the NHL bubble, which I personally think was the most successful bubble of all. The NBA is very successful, but I think the NFL or the NHL had a very successful one, in where they went to two different cities. They decided we're going to commandeer a couple of hotels and commandeer a couple of areas that probably needed the business. And yeah, there have been some stories about the players probably not exactly loving the environment all the time, but by and large, everyone understood the buy-in that needed to be had here. There are so many areas around the country that the NFL could have used, and hotels that are near some, or, you know, there was hospitality near some of these stadiums that they could have used. And the fact that those conversations didn't happen in order to get to those venues, the fact that the conversations didn't happen to ensure the players would sort of be financially prepared, because I think that was another end of this thing. It's like, well, you know, there's always a financial implication with this, as we saw in baseball. There's always other factors that just didn't come into play, it seems, from our standpoint, that they're reaping what they're sowing right now. Yeah. You know, I think when you have, in having a bubble, you can actually organize your practices a lot more. You can have an eye on these venues. You can have an eye on things. Maybe it'd be a little bit extra surveillance that some players may not want. But in order for things to progress the way they hope, like, this needed to happen, and it didn't happen. I think if you had a bubble, a situation like what you have in Tennessee, where you have, at last I heard, it was like 23 players tested positive and 23 staff. You know,
I think it's up. I think that as of, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, it was up to 24, I think, at that time. Okay. And you know, and really, and I'm glad you bring that up, is because the terms under which that happened. You talk about players being in the open, you know, for lack of a better term, people being in the open, being able to have that autonomy that, you know, I look at and I think about, you know, thing is the biggest risk. And, you know, come to find out that yesterday it was revealed that they were still conducting workouts and still playing at a local area high school, which is just,
and that's the thing, right? Let's see. when Tom Brady officially signed with Tampa Bay, there was a seemingly funny story about him and several players in the Buccaneers trying to get some practice time at a high school football field in the Tampa area. Yeah, it was a little funny because we all thought it was sort of like a nice lighthearted thing, but there was a little seriousness of these guys are trying to get their chemistry going. They're trying to get their reps in. Again, you had at the time where they could have, even if this is for training camp, at the time that the NFL had, again, watching everybody else sort of going through their bubbles, the NFL could have said, if we pick, say, 4 to 6 cities, whatever, well, maybe about 4 cities, maybe 8 if they want to go there, but 4 to 8 cities, we place a whole division here, we place like these random teams here, and we could have said, if you guys want to have your practice, you could use these high school facilities, which are not being used at the moment. You could use these college facilities, which are not being used at the moment, in order to conduct your practices. Everybody's going to play their games here. We're going to start at a certain time in the morning and run this through the evening. They could have done these things so that players and coaches didn't feel like they would never get their reps in. They wouldn't get their conditioning.
And then that also
that's what frustrates me.
That also alleviates the feel that people have to take things into their own hands to be
right.
on, and I think Ryan Tannehill, Titans quarterback, had statements yesterday saying, it's like, I got to get my throws in. I got to do what I got to do. They're a team that right now, because we did start the season underneath the terms of what we did, they're 3-0. They're playing for something. They've got this in their mind. And the thing we all know about athletics, and we think that anybody that's not just, stuck their head in a book and is only paying attention to the statistics of the game, is momentum matters. And when it's gotten started, it's gotten rolling, and they've gotten to where they're at. And, with a team like the Titans, let's not forget how close they were to getting over the hump and being in the Super Bowl last year.
Right.
They're carrying those feelings back, and that emotional capacity of the game does matter. So, they feel like they need to do this to keep an edge as they're looking at the other teams they're competing with, continuing to have that edge, staying out there doing that. And they're looking at it as, this is a disadvantage for us. We're going to fall behind. So because of that lack of preparation and that lack of access, you kind of put them in a position where they're fending for themselves too. And that's not where you want their head to be.
They're very much like the rest of the country right now. In a lot of ways, it's very reminiscent to how, the country by and large has handled the pandemic. It's not that I want to compare their particular situation to the gravity of, the everyday person, or even just like I say this because I'm here in New York, but like what my city's gone through. It's not to the same degree. And fortunate and blessedly so far, we're not talking about a loss of life or anything like that. Nothing that great. But there is this sense of being out there on your own, because I don't know if they did this because they feel like they didn't trust the NFL's leadership, and I imagine that's probably the case because, as we've seen over the years, players really don't trust Roger Goodell and the league office. I don't know if there is a sense of, to your point, the competitive nature that they have, this sense of we're 3-0, we have a chance to do something special. Maybe things would be differently if they were 0-3. I'm sure that's the case there. And let's not forget, Ryan Tannehill signed a new deal in the offseason, but we have in a roster of close to 60 guys. Not everybody's making the millions that he's making. So there are certainly some players who are saying, in addition to us being 3-0, I have to keep myself sharp in order to make sure that I can get paid.
How much in that situation, though, do you take it to Mike Vrabel? How much of it, we have said what we said about the league, we said about the players' desires, but how much of it comes down to institutional control, and how much of it comes down to the fact that keeping an eye on the bigger picture? And now, like we've seen in the past with the league, they're always willing to a certain extent, throw a hammer when there's been something they have to punish. Not necessarily acting proactively, but now they have to punish. And now it sounds like there could be any number of sanctions that are going to get put forward. Once again, putting Roger Goodell in that same situation of, being that commissioner that's inconsistent. But in this regard, he's having to be inconsistent because the returns are coming from a place of the unknown and have inevitable consequences that could happen.
I think here's the thing, like, you don't want to say he's blameless because he's really not. I mean, this is your team. You are the, I don't like when people say that the head coach is the CEO of the team, but you are pretty much the head honcho of the franchise outside of actual management and ownership. You are the person who is dealing with all your coaches and your players and whatnot. And whatever communication was lacking from his end, to make sure the players understood, like, yo, you cannot do certain things. That has to be addressed in some degree, not just with the team, not just the Titans management, but also the league itself. So, there is going to be a certain sanction against him, and in all likelihood, because if somebody's head's got a